Hi, Internet. I am Magnifica Sylvie La Chardonnere. I am a Laurel in the West Kingdom in the SCA, and I want to talk to you today about two books, Woven into the Earth and Medieval Garments Reconstructed. I previously talked about the Medieval Tailor's Assistant, which is sort of the one-stop shop, everything from, 1100 to 1480. And then I talked about the Tudor Tailor, which is really fabulous for the 16th century. And then I wanted to sort of give full coverage and come up with the one-stop shop for sort of the early period folks. And unfortunately, I've done early period costuming and I have early period books, but there doesn't seem to be a one-stop shop for early period costuming. There's a bunch of nice information here and there with a couple of different books, and there's some that give you patterns but don't really tell you where they came from, and some that give you all the words to describe the things but don't give you any patterns. But there doesn't seem to be really if you are just starting in the SCA and you want to do early period Viking Age, then this is the one book you need to pick up. And so I said, hey, Internet, because you guys are great, what do you guys suggest for the one-stop shop? And somebody suggested Medieval Garments Reconstructed. And it is a book, and it does have early period stuff in it, but I think it's misleading. And I want to talk about why I think it's misleading, and then sort of go back on myself and say that these two possibly are the one-stop shop, but they're not the one true book. So let me talk about what I mean when I say that. So let's go here. So here we have Woven into the Earth. This is a very thick, very thick volume. It was published in 2004. And then Medieval Garments Reconstructed is the companion garment. So this book has mostly the wordy words and the descriptions of the finds. And this one goes through into a lot more of the how you reconstruct these garments. Oh, here, for comparison, here we go. So you can see it's about half the size, a third of the size. This one goes into more of the clothing, the fabric, the sewing, the stitches that were used, the patterns that were used. But this is textiles from Norse Greenland. So it's Greenland. So if you're looking to reproduce Danish costume, if you simply looked in this book at the garments that are listed, these are from Greenland. It is completely and totally correct to use these and have absolute confidence that if you reproduce this, you will reproduce a costume that was like those things worn in Greenland. It's possibly a stretch to say this was worn in Sweden at the same time. It might have been. I don't really know. You can't be 100% assured of that based on the book. But if you're looking at the book, it has wonderful, fantastic, glorious information about costumes from Greenland. The second thing that sort of gives me trouble on this is, and this is very, very, very careful, it is Medieval Garments Reconstructed. And specifically, this is medieval, meaning the garments that are laid out in here, the earliest ones are from 1300 and they go as late as 1550. This is based on a selection of the garments found in Greenland. Now, there is one of the Greenland finds that are mentioned in Woven in the Earth that is dated to 1180 to 1310. So that is definitely closer to Viking Age clothing, but it's not Viking Age clothing. So I want to start with, let's start with Woven into the Earth. So as much as I say it's not a one-stop shop, they do also provide some really, really interesting details, and I probably should have bookmarked these, about Garments. Oh, and I'm not finding it. There we go. So we start having information about garments that are somewhat related to the Greenland finds. And specifically here, this is a Viborg shirt, which is one of my pet projects. We have the Greenland gown, which the Viborg shirt is essentially dated to about 1018 in Viborg. And the Greenland gown is dated to about, I want to say 1050, and is about 15 miles south of where Viborg is found. Very exciting. So as much as the book is about Greenland finds, they also mention some Scandinavian finds that are similar to the garments that they are finding in Greenland. So we have here the really nice images of the extant garment. This is the Greenland gown, the front and the back of the garment. And they give some nice details, actually previous page, some nice details about the sewing up of this garment. It is not as in-depth as you might want if you were going to reproduce this specific garment, but considering most of the details on this garment are in Swedish in books I don't own, this is really nice information to have. So they bring these two out in order to help to illustrate some of the garments that are in this book, and then they go into the garments that are actually found in Greenland. And here we have the extant garment, the front and the back of the garment. And in this case, this is the cotton that it was sewn onto for preservation in, I want to say, 1920. And so we have each of these garments. It goes into very deep detail about the garment, what it's sewn of, what it's made of. It's a very dense It's a dense book that has a lot of fabulous information and some really interesting details about these garments. I want to say it runs in the $40 range on Amazon, and I'll include the link when I post this out. If you're at all interested in earlier period, then I do recommend it. It has some really fabulous information. The companion is also really good, and they have really nice information about how the fabrics were made. Let's see if we can find that. So we have the tools that were used, what it means when they're talking about the S versus Z spun fabrics. They're talking here about the fact that the fabric was woven with the long hairs and the short fluffy hairs. So the long hairs are on the sheep are much stronger, and so those were used as the warp. And then the fluffy hairs are much they're fluffier. And then what you find is that when you wash this type of textile, it crinkles because of the different fibers in cross from each other. And I found that very interesting. I believe this is Vadmal that they're talking about. So we have interesting information about that. They have a lot of good details about how the looms were set up and used. Really good detail shots of how this fabric would be woven. We have great information with really fantastic details about how these garments were sewn together, what was used to put them together, and how the stitches were worked, and some of the things that possibly look like decorative stitches were probably more of a construction stitch. In this case, they have finished an edge with a double row of running stitch, and now they are doing an overcast on the raw edge with a yarn that is going to be held down in order to prevent the garment from fraying. And it's a really, really nice close-up view with a description of how this was done. They have information here about tablet weaving that was done along the edge, and I believe they have another here where they have finger loop braiding that was done, though they, from what I understand, the demonstration here is in the Scandinavian style, which is done with the hands down, and I've always done it European style with the palms up. So mileage may vary. They have information about buttons and buttonholes that were found on the garment. And then finally, at the back of the book, we get to the definition of the different types. Unfortunately, in here, they don't tell you the dating on these different types. For that, you'll need to look into the Woven into the Earth. But they tell you the different types and give you very simple line drawings of them based on Nordland's types for the garments. And then they start with the extant garment. What we know about the extant garment as far as what size it was in. This is what they think you should use when you're working up a pattern in order to resize it to fit somebody who is small, medium, or large. They have a list of the pieces that cut, and then they have a cutting diagram based on different fabric widths in order to reproduce the garment. And this is the garment that has been reproduced modernly with all the pieces and what it would look like without any of the pieces missing. So they do this for a lot of the garments, and then they have graded patterns. So we have the extant, which is the dark gray, a grain line on that to show us what the grain was on the original, and then they have sizing of what will be produced if you do the small pattern, medium pattern, or large pattern. So it's very useful for sizing this up, and they have this for all the different pieces, the sleeve pieces, the gussets, the gores. They have many of these garments, men's, women's. They do try and call out. I believe this one is a child's. I don't see it offhand, but I believe this one was a child's garment. They also have the same redrawing for the hoods that are included. Let's see if I can find the hoods. So we have the extant hood, we have the reproduction, and then we have the pattern laid out on two different fabric widths. We also have the pillbox hat, which I think is fabulous and not reproduced enough. There definitely should be more people wearing the pillbox hat. I don't know whether a man wore it or a woman wore it, but I think either one could probably get away with it. And then finally, we have, where'd it go? We have stockings, which I absolutely adore. So they have the extant stocking and what was laid out about it. And then again, the redrawing on two different fabric sizes and the resized pattern on the grid paper. So in closing, what would I say? I don't believe that I would say this is a one-stop shop, but if you're looking for a book that has really good costuming information and good background information, and it is based on archaeological finds, this is a fabulous resource. I believe Woven into the Earth runs in the $40 range, and I believe Medieval Garments Reconstructed is probably in the $35 range. I'll include links to both of those when I post this video. Okay, so if I'm wrong, if there is a one-stop shop that is a really good book to use for Viking Age clothing, please let me know. I would love to see it. And I will talk with you all later. Bye.